Psychotechnologies Live! Welcome to a very special episode of Psychotechnologies Live. This is a very interesting one. We have Danielle Johnson, who I met on Emerge. So Danielle and I work on the Emerge team together. And so this is like the first of like the Emerge. It's not the first Emerge night that we've interviewed, but it is the first one that we've interviewed since Emerge has started. So Danielle works on the fields team, and she has a special interest in weaving and field building. I'd love to talk with you about the merch stuff later, but first let's get to know you a little bit better. So you're a psychologist in your soul, and you're working on UTHBC, which is Unified Theory of Human Behavior and Consciousness. This sounds like very psychotech relevant. So what is it?
Where do we begin?
Where do we begin? How do we start? How do we like crack open this thing or even look at it?
Well, maybe we can talk about some of the influences that got me to the insights.
Like the perspective where you came to like, where
the inspiration, where it came from. Yeah. So as a psychologist, going through grad school, when I was looking back, I just remember having these moments all throughout grad school where something didn't feel right to me, but it was like what they were teaching me.
So it was grad school psychology?
Yeah, grad school in psychology. Exactly. So I actually got my master's in communications first, and then I was going to be a corporate trainer. And then I just felt like I wasn't done with school yet. Like something in me said, you're not done learning yet. You're not ready to just go and do the same thing. So I went back to grad school and got my another master's and my PhD in psychology. And so in that stint, as I started learning about, what the books said about psychology, there were just things that didn't sit, like, when I was in evolutionary psychology, like altruistic behavior, it was really hard. Like it was like, we can't understand why anybody would ever be altruistic. Like that totally goes against survival, and like the ideas of why we would be nice to each other. It
doesn't make sense. It actually makes a lot more sense if you meet psychology professors and then you understand why is anyone.
I want to like bring in a thread of when we talked to, I think it was Lehman brought it up, that there's not just one psychology, there's multiple psychologies. There's this like philosophical psychology, the one that we like think that our theory of mind. And then there's the academic psychology where we study a bunch of people and then there's a like practical therapeutic psychology that you sit in a therapy room with someone and you apply hopefully your philosophical and maybe some sort of like relational behavior, some sort of practice to help them with their stuff. And these are three different fields almost that like trying to inform each other and try and talk to each other. But because there's three psychologies, if the philosophy was wrong, we certainly don't know why people are behaving altruistically. But the like seeing it as three fields suddenly is like, oh, we got a bigger map of psychology.
And I didn't really feel like those three talked very often, at least in my experience with, academic psychology. Like there was very little philosophy in the department that I was in. Like I found that later that there was kind of like a branch.
But it wasn't like integrated in the rest of the psychology or the stuff that you were actually learning.
Right. And even the like clinical part was very separated from the social IO thing. So all of the different sections were like, I remember not even being allowed to take some of the clinical classes because it wasn't my area or whatever. So
so it's like very segregated, and so you can
right. And I don't think it was like, I don't think it was combative or anything. I just think people just kind of did their own things.
So you're there.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, or like, I remember them like telling me like, the brain is the thing. Like, you are just your brain. And I had to really work to figure out, like, okay, I'm just my brain. Like, it was a process. I remember it was one of those things that I had to really make myself believe, because it didn't fit with my experience. Or I took a psychopathology class and they were like, okay, well, this is what ADD is, and this is what I learned in that class was that we really don't know a lot. Like, even the people that are writing the DSM are still, psychology is a really new field as far as studying it scientifically. And so people are still learning about it. And is it a thing, or is it a dimension? Or I just feel like we don't know a lot yet. So there was just all these things that didn't align with my experience of the world, that they were telling me that I was supposed to feel or think or whatever. And I was kind of going along with it. And then at one point I was just like, I read this article and it was like, why evolutionary psychology might not be true or whatever. And it just kind of exploded my brain. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm allowed to question evolutionary theory? Like, okay, that's awesome. And so I literally had my dissertation meeting, and I was presenting my proposal to my two advisors, and I went in, and my proposal was, I started with, what if Darwin was wrong? And I just remember my professor going, and just, like, but I don't know. It just was coming out of me. I couldn't, once it clicked for me, I couldn't stop it. I was following the idea. It was not something that I planned on or that I wanted, or it was
just this thread that you had to
follow. Yeah, it happened to me. And there was literally one moment, and this sounds so dramatic, but there was literally one moment where it was like everything that had happened to me in the past, it was the culmination of my life events. And I for some reason, I recorded myself going through the whole process, like, because I was being a scientist, but the subject was me. And so you can hear me in the recording. I'm like, I don't know, this is so weird. It's like the culmination of my life events are coming into this moment. And then I stop and I go, come on, the culmination of, how stupid are you? That's ridiculous. And so you can just hear my two selves like fighting each other on the recording. Like, what are you even talking about? So it was not something I was trying to do or even thought I could do. And it just happened.
It sounds like a religious experience almost. Just like, I guess.
I mean, yeah, that was it definitely, kind of coming into this independence as a scientific scholar absolutely corresponded with a spiritual, transcendent,
like awakening
series of events that, kind of exploded into whatever it is on my living room wall right now.
I'm kind of, when I sit with, Emerge is very young. And when I sit with the Emerge team and I sit in conversation, I'm kind of constantly asking, like, who the heck is this person? Like, who is Danielle or the other people on the team? Who are these people and why are they even here? And I feel like I'm starting to hear the answer to that question. This is why you're here at Emerge, because you had this transcendent experience in building a theory of psychology, and you're like, oh, there's something I need to onto through a emergent process.
Yeah. But I mean, it's been a long road here. That was 2013. So. Okay.
So then 10 years of writing out the theory more and like creating the links?
No, 10 years. I mean, do you want to hear all about the 10 years?
I don't know. I don't.
It's interesting. Yeah.
That's where you want to go.
So, I mean, I walk into my advisor and tell him, what if Darwin is wrong? Right. And that's weird. And now I just start talking about how I'm going to unify all of psychology and save psychology, and don't understand why nobody else gets how it's not the best idea that anybody's ever had. Literally just walking around grad school for 2 years like that.
That's when they put you in an inpatient for being
right. Really. Like I had weird looks a lot. And as an intuitive, open person, it was hard. Those last few years were real hard. First of all, because I was just openly talking about this unified theory of everything to everybody I saw, and just it was so self-evident to me. But also because I wanted to work on it, and they said, well, you can't do your dissertation. That can't be your dissertation. And so my brain was like thinking about psychology from the perspective of the universe, right, at the Big Bang. And I was supposed to be writing a paper and doing a study on how questions, like how relevance questions before reading a passage made somebody more or less curious. And it was just,
like
felt like I was squishing my brain. Like I felt like they're like, study the brain. And they're like, but you have to do it only using this one neuron. And I really felt like I was having to like squeeze my brain down to even think about my dissertation. And so that was just a really psychologically painful place to be, when all my brain wanted to do was be as big and open and everywhere as possible. So yeah, it was tricky. So when I graduated in 2015, I was not in a healthy state. Like I didn't leave my house months. I thought people were tricking me. Like when you first experience synchronicity and you don't know what it is, and you don't have people in your life to tell you what it is, it can just be really challenging. And so I went to a pretty dark place. And I mean, I don't know how much I'm supposed to disclose here, but like that,
as much
that
as you feel comfortable.
Well, I just don't know what people care about, like, but my last year in grad school, my house was in foreclosure because I thought I was following the idea and I thought the universe would provide. And so money would just come because this was absolutely something I was supposed to be doing. And so I must just follow the path, and had no kind of practical awareness. I broke my arm. And so I was walking around like in a cast, and I had that whole thing happening. And I decided, like my last semester, when most people just do whatever, I'm going to take a full load of graduate philosophy classes because this is what it's telling me to do. And yeah, it was a hard year. And I got to a place where I really didn't have anybody. Like my sister has always been kind of my true blue person, and she's always been there, but I pushed all the people in my life away pretty much as far as they could go. So yeah, so it took me a few years to recover, and I would just go to Starbucks and sit there and think about it and write stuff, but never anything where I could send it to somebody and they would be able to understand it. You know what I mean? It was bits and pieces of things. It was never like, I haven't ever really connected at all. And so it's glimpses, and it's very embodied and from a very my perspective. So it's almost like when I was having those transcendental experiences and looking at the world in that way, I could see the truth of things. And so it was whatever I was looking at in the moment, like whatever psychological study I would read, I'd go, oh yeah, this, Danielle, you were talking about how with your theory, you kind of do that, right? It was like, oh, I would look at this theory and go, oh, well, if I put it in the lens of this is why those results make sense. But then I just have random studies. Like I felt like I needed something where I could take every study, like do a meta analysis. And that would be what I was like, how I would prove my part of the theory. But it takes a long time to do that.
Yeah, no, these are life work things, I think.
Yeah.
Even though like it feels like I think like there's these moments of clarity where you see it all, but then as you like work with it, you realize to manifest it in the world is a lot longer than it is to glimpse an insight of it.
Can you
Yeah.
show us the model? Can you turn the computer around? Because I know you're glancing at it over the screen. Just like a quick flash of the.
Yeah.
So
Can you see
I
it?
love this thing. I don't know what it says because it's too far away from the camera, but I'm like, oh, that. And it's like there must be something amazing in that array of information.
Well, and that was like all in my brain, and I just really just ejected it onto the wall in a matter. I mean, probably 75% of that came out in 2 days because it was just there was no space for it in my brain anymore. It was all the stuff I had been collecting, you know what I mean, and didn't have a way. Like if I had Miro back then, that would have changed my world. But yeah. I think one of the big things was when I kind of separated my body and my feelings, or my brain and my feelings. Since I was 18 years old, I struggled with mental health issues, various mental health things. And so part of my fascination with psychology was figuring out what was wrong with me and how to fix myself and fit into the world. You know what I mean? Now I know it was the world is broken, not me. You know what I mean? But during that time, I was really trying to say, oh, shoot, why am I failing at all this stuff? Why do I go to a job and then realize it sucks and then not want to do it anymore? And attributing it to me being wishy-washy and not good enough and all those things. And really it was like, no, because it was killing your soul and you didn't want to do it anymore. So that's why you failed. But during this time, a great influence in my life was my therapist, Dr. Long. Shout out to Dr. Long. He was amazing. He we really went into a lot of depth, and he was Jungian, so he had kind of that background, was very into Maslow and those kind of ideas. So that was very humanistic approach in that therapy, which suited me perfectly. And he was just very wise and gentle and a very trusting relationship. So I was able to get a lot of the traumas that I had been holding on to out. But he recommended focusing. And so are you guys familiar with focusing?
Yep.
Okay. And so, I had kind of this profound experience where I was practicing focusing and I was feeling anxious about stuff. And so I was talking to my feelings and asking them, well, why are you scared? Why do you have butterflies right now? Blah, 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 kind of talking through it. And I just remember the moment when I kind of figured out why. I was like, oh, you're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of being a failure. And then it just dissipated, like it just went away. And that was a real key moment for me, realizing that I could, with my brain, talk to my emotions and kind of work through them in that way. That was a real big switch in my life. So.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I wish I work with people in one-on-one settings, and I'm like, I wish I could give more people that, like a moment like that with the focusing, like, that's what it's for. That's what it's meant to do. When it really like, So wait a second. What's your relationship with failure now? Are you like, or like being a failure was the particular keyword? I assume it's now very different.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, after that, it went to like, I can never fail. Like the universe is on my side and this is the theory and it's going to lead to world peace. And like, so I tend to go to extremes if you know anything about me, like, and that's part of, where I got the theory, and I know now it's like the masculine and feminine energies, right? But I feel like that's how we learn, is when we go to the different extremes, you can learn all the way up and then learn all the way down, right? And the key is to come back to balance. But so yeah, so I went to that place, but then went all the way up to there is no failure. and that's kind of where I'm not quite as manic about it, but that's kind of where I land now, is, you know, you just learn, right? So I just heard the best quote today from Miss Carly. Shout out to Miss Carly in Rockford. She runs a nonprofit organization that works with people who are displaced and need shelter and food and things. But anyway, it said, I'm going to lose it now, but it was like, failure means you're still trying or something, or failure means you're still going forward. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I see it too, is just like, what is failure? Like, that's just some arbitrary thing that we put on it, right? It's all just about learning different things. And I think that's what they mean in this world when they talk about it being a process and not stuff. But yeah, I don't even know if you can fail. I think you just do the best you can in every moment and then try to do better in the next moment. And that's what you do.
Yeah. I think a lot of failure is like, science is mostly failure. And if you think about it, like most experiments fail and then one works. And now we're like, oh, now we have this whole, like, now we know how to do this thing. And then you're kind of like done with it. So, and like sales, also I used to do sales, and like sales is mostly failure. And then you get like one sale and like, that's good. And that makes up for all of them. So it's like definitely this perspective shift that I think you're doing, which is really good. And so I'm curious, like, how does this fit into your theory? Like, how does like this perspective shift this?
Well, I think it was the theory. Like, when I look at this wall, what I see is really just me on this wall. And that's very egoic, right? And very kind of, I had to really detach myself and not make my identity be the theory, right? But it really is kind of me describing how I see the world. And when I was in that place for a while or when I get to a place sometimes, I don't know, I haven't been there in a while, but where I just feel in balance and aligned and kind of moving with the way of the universe instead of fighting against it in any way. That's what I consider to kind of be my best self. That's how I see human psychology. And so in my brain is, if you're standing in that spot and you see the different parts of human psychology, then everything else after that is just the influence of all the forces in the world on you, right? But that kind of place in that moment is kind of this framework of what human psychology starts from. And then now, if we can look at it from that, all the things are just what we add in. Oh, we add in some fear here, and that's why this happens. Or we add in, forces from the outside that shape us and create our personalities, right? And lead to our different experiences and guide us through life. And so all of those moments kind of led to what is on this wall of just kind of what it's like to be a human. It's a really inner view of psychology. It's not like some of these theories where they're kind of looking at it from the outside. It's a really personal kind of, oh, this is how I experience the world, and this is why I don't think that rings true. And so that's one of the reasons why I have trouble talking about it in kind of normal academic, or like there's this conference tomorrow, the Consilience conference tomorrow. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but I'm presenting a little half-hour presentation there, and I'm terrified because I I'm not a Greg Heinriquez or a Bobby Azarian or a Brendan Graham Dempsey, right? I don't have whatever it is they have to like prove their theory.
It's like still in development, your theory.
Yeah, but it's also different. It's also me. And so here's an example. Like I would remember after kind of my spiritual experience, I would be doing something in the world. I'd be behaving, right? And somebody would see it and they would interpret it as something else. And so I was like experiencing spiral dynamics, right? I was experiencing, because I think in spiral dynamics, like you can behave like it skips a level. Is that true?
Often, one thing is that if someone has only climbed so high up the spiral dynamics meaning making, if you're above them, they map you down. And so if you are, let's say, if they are at blue and you're taking orange actions, they think you're being a red, which is the level below. They think you're being a bit of a brute. And they're like, why don't you just be civilized, right? And you're like, civilized, the rules are broken. We have to break out of this rule-bound structure to get to the outcomes. And they're like, you're being a brute. You're breaking my perfect rule-bound world. And you're like, no, the rules are broken. we need to be able to like get out of these rules in order to actually get results. And I'm going to get away with it, right? Because at first they'll like try and shut you down, and then you'll like actually have success, and they'll be really confused because they'll be like, why was the brute able to succeed against the rules when the brute was clearly against the rules? And, you know, this is potentially like you went to court and you argued that the law needed to be changed, and then you won, right? Where someone at that level was like, the law has to be like this. And you're like, well, no, actually, I think the law should be different. And the judge heard your reasoning and decided that the law should be changed. And that's like, but why was it possible to like for someone at that blue level, the law was fairly solid. And for you, it was like, well, no, we got to argue with it when it's wrong. And so you had the level above, but you looked to them like you were the level below.
Right. And so it was like I was experiencing spiral, like that's how I learned spiral dynamics, right? From like being in a situation where I was getting misjudged for those things and going, what is this? And kind of writing that down, right? I learned oscillation from oscillating between viewpoints. And so I didn't read metamodernism, you know, I felt it. And maybe that's how everybody gets to it. I don't know. But I feel a lot of times that when I talk about my theory, I'll say something and somebody else will be like, oh no, that's this theory. And I'm like, it doesn't feel right because it's my experience. Like, this is how I experience free will. It's not how can somebody, whoever, take my experience from me and call it their theory? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Plus, I don't really believe in the ownership of ideas in general. Like, it's really not something I hold very tightly. So that is another reason why it's hard for me to kind of promote this as that. Mm-hmm. It's easy for me to promote it as my experience and valid in that way and explaining things, but it's hard for me to say like, oh, here's my unified theory of psychology.
Mm.
I can see, so one thing that I see pulling together a lot of psychology is something like perspective taking. And integral theory really loves perspective taking and talking about different perspectives, because each of us is a first-person human experiencing reality. And then we're often told theories like, despite the fact that you're looking out of your eyes at this table is actually made out of atoms. And we're told in such convincing ways that I believe that underneath the table is atoms, that even though I can't see them, I just assume that that is the case. And we got a lot of our modern psychology has our experiential being interrupted by these non-experiential ways of seeing the world, which are probably correct. Science is probably correct, but also in some sense, it's not true. Like, because I can't perceive it from a human perspective, it's not true. It's got to be limited by what I can perceive in my human perspective. And like, I should be, if I want to interact with the universe in a more healthy way. I've got to interact with my experience of the universe, not
Right.
experience of the universe that someone has told me that, people are being kind. Well, except for that person who wasn't being kind. I have a problem here because I experienced them as not kind. No matter how many times people tell me they were kind, unless I see them as kind myself, that's like, there's a bottleneck here. Things are written for me through my own subjective, personal perspective experience. And that's like the unification. I suspect part of the unification we need is that, like, helping people to build strong individual first person models, and then obviously fit in with everyone else's, because if we just have a lot of narcissists, that doesn't help. But we need to build everyone up and help them to build each other up too. And I'm guessing about this theory still. I'm like trying to piece this together.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I can't, I can say what the parts are, but I can't write a book about it, really. I can't, or at this point, I guess I can't. So one other, another key conception that felt very real to me was like free will and evolutionary theory. When I said Darwin was wrong, evolutionary theory to me kind of stopped when we got to this. We developed our prefrontal cortex, right? And we could have self-reflective thinking, and then we could really change our environment in ways that was huge. That to me kind of flipped the sign on Darwinian evolution and could lead to things like a conception of free will, and which is like, so here's the state of psychology. And again, this was 2015, so it might have changed now. But when I was there, it seemed crazy to me that in psychology, we weren't even studying consciousness. To the point where at one of the schools that I taught at, in our intro class, they would have a special book made where they actually took out the chapter on consciousness, and they'd reprint the book exactly the same, except just missing the chapter on consciousness. And that's the book that we sold to students.
That is,
jeez.
That's like,
and so it's like, how do you study psychology and not even have consciousness as being part of the discussion?
I feel like that lecturer got in a fight with that publisher or the book writer. It's just like, I don't like your chapter, I'm just going to hit delete. And I can do that because I have the power to delete your entire in the book.
I'm gonna force like 1,000 students to buy this book. So
without the chapter,
listen to me.
Right. It's just it, and none of the other schools none of the other schools that I taught at, and I've taught at like 5 different schools, teach it. Most of them don't go to the extreme of having a special book printed, but none of the schools have it on their, and again, this might be changed now, but yeah, it's not part of the curriculum that you teach. It's every chapter except the chapter on consciousness. And that just
part of the cognitive science programs.
This is from the psychology side. So this may be a stupid question. Where would you find the consciousness? Is that more in the studies of religion, studies of spirituality stuff? Is someone else teaching it and it's just not in psychology, or it's just like there's a little black hole here and no one's talking about this bit?
I mean, when I took my classes in philosophy, they talked about it a lot. Like I got it there. Philosophy of mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're pretending psychology is pretending that's a different department.
Correct. Correct. Because, well, and to be fair to psychology, they got a really bad rap for a long time. And so have been trying really hard to be taken seriously as a science. And to do that, you have to kind of wash away the woo-woo stuff. And I think that's been very important to the field of psychology. But I think it's also been a little detrimental to the field of psychology. Like, I don't. And maybe it's just, again, the ebb and flow, right? You have to go to one extreme and then to the other. And now I think consciousness is, I bet, coming back in now, that the internet is everywhere and technology is advanced. So like you can't keep that information away from people anymore. And I think it's just becoming more accepted to kind of think about those things. But I could be wrong. It could just be because that's where my echo chamber that I'm in right now, and everybody thinks that's cool to talk about.
It was very cool to talk about.
I kind of have this question of like, how do you weave this into a merge now that you're on the planning? How the heck do we make this show up? I don't know, but like, how the heck are we gonna something it?
Yeah, like how does this
I don't
connect
know.
to?
How do we put it in with people?
Well, and it was actually me kind of giving up on it that got me to emerge, I think, because I, like I said, I worked on it for probably 3 years. I presented, so fermi-lab, you guys know what fermi-lab is? So fermi-lab is the high particle nuclear accelerator. And they had a philosophy club. So I was looking for things to do. So I would go to the philosophy club. So I presented my theory at the fermi-lab philosophy society club or whatever, and just realized where the minds of scientists were and how much pushback there was just in that one little meeting, and how just, this is going to take 50 years to prove this to anyone. Like, this is not, when I first had it, I really thought I was going to like walk into my professor's office and they would be like, this is the most amazing idea I've ever heard.
It's the dream, right?
Yeah.
The dream.
And then
is
I was like, oh man, this
show
is
up your teacher, you walk into the room and you're like, bam, and they're like blown away and you're like, whoa.
How did you do this? That did not happen.
The virtuoso student out of nowhere. Doing piano concertos with one
She was
hand.
so weird. This is what she was doing.
Like child prodigies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that did not happen. But I kind of gave up on it, right? And so then I took a job with a nonprofit organization, and I worked with kids inside the Department of Juvenile Justice, and that was I had to go to a completely different place to be able to interact and mentor and talk to those students. But I also just saw how amazing they were and how self-aware they were, and how, they would go, Dr. Johnson, I'm getting very angry right now. I need you to step away from me because I don't know what I'm going to do. And I don't know if I'm like, that's brilliant. Do you understand that what you're doing, like that, the control you have of your emotions right now is brilliant. And I had some personal tragedies in my life that reminded me that I really, in my soul, what I've always wanted to do, and why I even started to be a psychologist, was that I wanted to help people, that I wanted to use this information to help people. And help might be the wrong word now. I don't even know how I feel about help, but to empower people to not be so sad. And, I found happiness for once I kind of broke free, I found, I still have really bad days where I'm hopeless, but I had a purpose then. And so, I just wanted to help I just want to help other people kind of find what I found through that. And so that's why I want to create this new world, right? Is because I just see the people who are miserable, and it's not because of them, it's because of the systems, and it's because things are soul sucking and you have to compromise who you are to make a living. And I don't know, that's a rant, but
that's big.
So building the field is important to me because I want to be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm. If you want to be able to have everyone have these moments of realizations and like I guess, like reclaim their soul almost.
Well, yeah, and have opportunities to make a living for themselves where they don't have to make bad choices to, sacrifice their mental health to a really high regard or feed their family. That's a really crappy choice. And not only a crappy choice, but like, what a waste of human potential. Like, what if we all just were able to do these things? What could we do as a human species if we were able to flourish? And why aren't we flourishing? Because there's a lot of stickiness in the system that doesn't need to be there. And I don't really believe in utopia in this perfect world, but I also think we could help people in a way. We could create systems that were more conducive to the human spirit, which is directly aligned with what Emerge is kind of trying to do. And which is why when I went to the Emerge Austin conference, even though I didn't really know it at the time, like walking in, I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I came out and really understood, oh, we're building a field here, I said, oh, okay, that gives me hope. That might actually do something in the world. You know what I mean? Not that my impact on my community here isn't doing something in the world, but my brain's just big. My brain just goes there. And so it's where I feel I can do the most good. Sorry, that was really
No, that was beautiful. I like hearing you talk. Like a lot of the Merge stuff I find it very wishy-washy and like hard to like pin down, but that was like, that really did feel like you were like the spirit of Emerge.
I want to know, I heard this word or this phrase, the human spirit. And when I hear you say that, I have this hunch that you're talking about, like, you're naming something in your own experience that is like, oh yeah, obviously this is what I mean when I say human spirit. You're like, duh, this one, it's like, feels like this, it's absolutely here, it's entirely apparent to my conscious psyche what I mean when I say human spirit. Now, you didn't say that out loud. I just want more of like, what do you mean when you say human spirit? Like,
well, again, from my experience, right? You started with that.
And also, second question, how do you work with it? This thing is very important. We're calling it the human spirit in this moment. What is that, and how do we work with it? How do we help others work with it? Like, let's create a psychotechnology almost. Like, how do we work with that thing?
Okay. Well, how do we work with it, I think, is an easier question for me, because I think it's hard to help people find it, right? I think first you have to help people find it, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. And then I think you have to clear the path to let them live it. So what is there to find, I guess, is the next question, right? In my theory calls it a soul. To me, it was the place when I kind of cleared out the trauma, right? And I cleared out the societal expectations and cleared out, all the forces that were extrinsic, and was really just kind of holding all my intrinsic motivation and living from that intrinsically motivated place. That to me was 100% living from my human spirit. And then I think, and I don't think you can do it 100%, right? Because you have to interact with other people. And anytime you interact with something, there's going to be a force in the opposite direction. And that's a boundary that you have to navigate, right? But I think as much as we can allow people to live from that pure, intrinsically motivated place with, no, I already said that. So from that intrinsically motivated place, I think that's letting people live from the human spirit. And I think the systems, how they're designed right now, just make that really, really hard, at least in my experience. It's like it's you have to make really hard choices, and you have to sacrifice your values, and you have to sacrifice your autonomy, and you have to, I think that's probably the key to it, is the autonomy, is the not being really able to do the things you know you can do, or know you should do, or want to do, when it's coming from a place of that kind of clear, trauma-free perception. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying everybody should just get to do whatever the hell they want all the time, because I think it's cloudy, right? But I think when you're living in integrity and you can't do the things because your boss is micromanaging you, or because somebody else's traumas are like coming out at you, projecting onto you or whatever, then that's hindering.
Okay, so I got find. You got to find it.
Yeah.
Clean. You got to clean it, because you got to clean up some of the trauma and stuff in the way. Gotta like.
Yep.
I suspect there's one here of like cultivate. Like you gotta. It's gotta be my. This is sort of theory of my perspective. You'll start with a small flame, and you've got to get that small flame. You got to cultivate. You got to grow it big enough that it is a loud enough signal that it can actually give you direction in life. And then you said fourth was autonomy. There's a like, and like, it's great to have okay, you've got a little spark in there, but it's really got to be big enough that it's loud enough that it tells you what to do next. Otherwise, you just got this like a little spark that keeps getting rained on by society. Like, nope, we want you into this structure. No, we need you over there. Like, no, you have to follow the rules like this. Like, oh, that's gonna suck. But so there's a cultivation. And
a control to it too, though, because you don't want to cultivate too far either. So it's a controlled burn, right? Or controlled growth. Yes.
I'm thinking of a quote by name escapes me. If you're a candle, like a small flame, and there's a breeze, you may get like knocked out. But if you're a bonfire and there's a breeze, you'll get like bigger. You'll just be a bigger bonfire. Like, you know, they're like, be a bonfire. Like, you need to cultivate the spark that is big enough that when the breeze comes, you just like take the breeze in your stride. I suspect this happens in like a bit of cancel culture. There's two responses to being canceled. One is like, oh no, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing. This is terrible. The other is like, ha ha ha, you can't cancel me. I'm too big and too loud, right? And we know which ones seem to, like from the inside, the ones that seem to be happy after are the ones that do that, like, I'm the bonfire one. Whereas anyone who gets canceled and does the seemingly weak thing in response to the cancellation ends up in a like poorer position socially, ends up in a like societally ignored, probably more likely to get canceled. Like, but there's this other thing, like be the bonfire, which I'm like, oh, okay, you require some like cultivation and like controlled, rigorous cultivation. And then like, well, I just can't be, if I've cultivated that in a healthy way, I can't be canceled because I'm like, no, I stand by what I said.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Socrates is one of my heroes for that.
And I suspect that Socrates, the memory of Socrates is still alive today because he ended up dying, but his theories lived on because
his spirit.
But if that's how you're going to die, like that's the way to go, I think, is just doing what you believe in. You know, that's another way that I can not worry about failure. It's just if I'm true to that, right? If I'm aligned with that, then okay. If the world hates it or everything goes crazy, it was still the right choice.
All right. There's like a spark the human spirit. That's a like, I think we got to rename theory spark the human spirit, you know? Like, oh, that's a ignite people's souls a little. I like it. I like it a lot. I study spiritual maps a lot. a variety of spiritual maps. So Buddhism has a couple of path maps about what it's like to, like, from starting to meditate from the first time you sit down and be like, what's this meditating thing? I'm going to try it, to like all the way down the path to like, I can now sit and meditate for like a period of time without distraction, to like, I'm a full master of meditation. I teach people. I'm that good at meditation. And they kind of have the map of what it will feel like along the way and what it's like to travel that map. So does spiral dynamics, is a theory of growing up. Like, there's a lot of different like map-based paths. There's like Kabbalah is another map-based path, if you can see it like that. Like, there's actually a blueprint on how to live a life and how to be a good person in that model. And there's like, what else do we have on my maps? Buddhism has a couple maps of what will happen and what will fall away as you follow the practices. Yoga also has its own maps of like how you will change as a person as you keep following the path. There's a lot of, and this sounds like an incredible map.
Yeah.
Like,
that reminds me when I did the 10-day Vipassana retreat, you would listen to him talk every night, right? And he would say, today you felt this, and you're like, wait, what? How did you know that that's exactly what I went through today? And it's, yeah.
One of the comments is like, the food's really boring and bland and tasteless. And like, it's on day 3 where you're like, day 3 is where you're sick of the food. And it's like, how did he know? You know, then on day 6, he's like, you're missing your friends at home. I'm like, what? How did he do that? This is the evening discourses of the Vipassana. They play a video. He made it in like the 90s, and they're still playing it today. And he's like spot on about the experience that you have as you do a Vipassana. Yeah. And that's I have the sense that the path looks like the path. It obviously has nuance for each person, but the path looks like the path no matter who you are. Or which tradition you grew up.
Fascinating to me, because that's one of the areas where I'm a little bit weaker in, is the spiritual aspect of it. Like, I definitely know it's a part, but I don't know enough about those paths to kind of line them up. That's very interesting to me.
Another pop culture one is the tarot deck. The tarot deck has 20 major arcana cards, and it's like number 0 is the Fool, and then the Fool starts the journey and walks past card 1, 2, 3, 4, which are like the king and the whatever, and he like goes on his journey and he meets the magician and he meets this, and like it's a map. There's literally just a map of the path.
I did not know that. Oh, so like, cool.
Yeah, you can read the story of the major arcana, and it describes the path, and you can feel free to compare it to your map and see if it's like in line, out of line. Like, you'll be like, oh, see, I'm a map collector, and I really like different maps have different granularity in different moments. So like, every meditative map starts with like, step 0 is to hear the instructions of meditation, right? And then like sit down and meditate. And then like a little bit after, you need to actually develop a daily practice of meditation. But that like step 0 is like, you need to hear the instructions and then like try them. If you can't remember that, like if you're too young to hear the instructions or remember the instructions, you can't be instructed. Like, end of story, you're not on the path yet. You can't be on the path yet. If you're too distracted and you're too disinterested in the path, we can put you in the school, in a classroom, and tell you to meditate as many times as we like. But if you don't want it, you can't start the path. Like, that's like, okay, cool. Like, and then another path, there's a book I really love, is Daniel P. Brown, Pointing Out the Great Way. And in that path, instead of starting at the instruction, he actually starts at like, the guru should be an appealing human, right? They should dress like a king. He should be adorned in all sorts of jewels. He doesn't care about the jewels because he's the guru, right? He's spiritually enlightened. But people should look at that guy and go like, what's he got? I want that thing, you know? And then they should be drawn to him. Like, the path actually starts for the student at being drawn to the guru and going like, what is not just the jewels that you have, but they're noticing that they also have the spiritual path. They have the spiritual awakening. And so that path, it's got more granularity at the start of the path, that the guru should be someone who is appealing, that people should be drawn to. This is like, shave your beard and look like, if you're a society that clean shaven, like, don't be a like bearded crazy man who's like, it's a theory. Be like, no, you have to present well. Like, if you want people to follow the path, you need to present it well. And that's it. Like there's more granularity there than on this other path that just said, hear the instructions.
Yeah.
So I collect maps because different maps have like the bends like better line like drawn out on the map. So and then I like obviously cross compare and I'm like, oh yeah, the spark thing, like, yeah.
That's so cool.
This is my like, so I'm like, oh yeah, this all completely perfect. We fit, you know, when I said like,
all right, we should take all three of our parts and like combine them.
yeah. Well, I do see an idea of bringing a whole bunch of practitioners together who have, at this point, you've recognized a bunch of your path. I've recognized a bunch of my path. Bring it like a whole room full of people who've gone like, I've already traveled the journey and I arrive here at the room. Let's swap notes. Let's like compare paths, because then it's not an individual path, it's a collective path, right? Suddenly we're the collective building multi-path models, as opposed to like, I use
absolute. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say, like, I can't keep it in. I can't keep it in. That's absolutely part of like how I want, when we're talking about the field survey, one of the questions to ask people, because I would love to just kind of collectively see the journeys that we're on. I think, I don't know, I'm really excited about the field study. I think we can do so many cool things with all the new technology and who we have on the team. And
I had this conversation with Daniel offline, but I had this idea of like developmental models. Piaget studied his kids and was like, this is what kids develop through. Like some of the spiral dynamics or ego development, Susan Cook-Reuter, the Keegan stuff, the sentence completion test stuff, they studied a small cohort, but you get a different model if you're one researcher from the Western educated, the weird, right? Western education, industrialized, rich and democratic, than if you take people from other cultures who maybe went through more of a tribal path. It became a spiritually like more mature bonfire, and it arrived and go like, wait, I didn't do that one. I grew up, but I didn't do that one. You bring all those people together and compare their paths and build a collective model. You get a very different thing than if you get one individual studying a bunch of people building the model.
Yep.
So I'm excited.
And that was one of the dreams of my theory. Like I got to a point where I'm like, it's not about me anymore. It's what if we could take, like, big data is a thing. Big data like blew my brain when it happened. Again, this was 2015. Like now the stuff that's coming out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But it's like, let's take all the different experiences and put them together and see what a true collective intelligence would be. Yeah, I love the idea of that.
So there's one criticism of the current vertical development models is the way they were built. They were built from the Western perspective. They were built from the like what the West values got put at the top of the hierarchy, and they were built by an individual. And if you want a culturally complex and a culturally self-aware model, you need the model to be like, wait a second, this is my lineage, my path through life to here. This is yours. This is yours. Like, not only is there a recognition that we build the model on all of our paths, and all of our paths should be included in the model, so people can like be like, wait a second, Elliot here is biased because of the world he grew up in when he wrote the model, right? And that needs to be in the model. When he wrote the model, he's biased. So unless we want to forever be biased, we need to actually rewrite the model without the bias, or with like this other person's bias, or with multiple people's biases, but honest about it. And then as a collective model, then we can get like a more collective development. We can get to a different level. We can get to a layer of something that we can't currently do with the individual-centric, Western-centric model.
Yep.
Anyway, that's what I want to see happen at Emerge.
Well, that would be amazing. I'm on board for that. Let's do it.
Is there any other bits of the model that you want to put in this video? Because this is the start of everyone else starting to think about the story of their lineage and the one that needs to be included in their video, so that when we enter that room together, something's already recorded.
Yeah.
Like know each other. There's this idea of parasocial relationships that like everyone who watches my podcast kind of like knows me, but only like it's a one-way relationship, right? Because they're behind the other end of the screen and they like know me, but I don't. Like someone can come up to me and be like, thanks for watching my videos, but I just don't know who you are. Like, nice to meet you, but also like, but if we have multiple people doing the videos, we get like multiple directions of parasocial relationships. We can actually have an interaction and engagement.
Can I just say how important that is? Because that is exactly how I came into this world, is just knowing everybody before they knew me, just because all I did was watch them on podcasts, right? So I kind of went into that space just, and then you already start off on a weird spot. If you're trying to build trust and, you know, get rid of power dynamics and have relationship with the same thing, it's like hard to do that when you go in and you're like, well, I already know so much about you and you don't even know my name. Just love that idea of.
It evens the playing field.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else we need to include in your video about you so people can come up to you and go, Danielle, I saw the video.
I know. That will be great. They'll ask me about the copper mine.
Yeah.
Psycho